I gave up my job, my 20s, and any chance at a normal life to take care of my dad for 8 years. But when he died, the will didn't even mention my name. Everything went to my brother, the one who hadn't shown up in nearly a decade. My name is Laura Bishop. I'm 36 years old. Before everything changed, I was an ICU nurse in Chicago. I loved the work. I loved the rhythm of it, the order and chaos, the way time stretched and collapsed in a place where every second mattered. But 8 years ago, one call changed everything. My father had a massive stroke. He was living alone in our old house in Austin. There was no one else to care for him. My mother passed away when I was 17, and my younger brother, Kyle, had already moved to Seattle chasing some startup dream that flamed out in a year. He never came back. I put in for extended leave. Then I quit, moved back into the house I grew up in. At first, I thought it would be temporary just until Dad got better. But strokes don't always work that way. His body recovered faster than his mind. He needed help dressing, bathing, eating. He couldn't remember appointments. Some days he didn't remember I was his daughter. So I stayed. 8 years of cooking, cleaning, handling his meds, driving him to doctors, fighting with insurance companies, managing hospice when the time came. I learned about long-term care, estate planning, power of attorney. I did everything right. I sacrificed quietly. I thought he knew that. We didn't have a perfect relationship. He was distant, sometimes stubborn, and rarely said thank you. But there were moments, brief but real, where I knew he saw me. Once, when I caught him staring at an old photo of me at graduation, he said, "You were always the one I could count on." I held on to that. I thought it meant something. I thought it would matter. It started with little things too small to question at the time. Dad grew more guarded in his final months. He stopped letting me read his mail. He kept a folder tucked under the cushion of his recliner and would flinch when I got too close to it. When the family attorney, Mr. Halford, began dropping by more often, I wasn't invited into the room, just some financial housekeeping, Dad would say. But that wasn't like him. For years, he relied on me for everything, checking his account balances, organizing bills, setting up his doctor visits. Suddenly, he wanted space. I figured it was pride, or maybe denial. When people get close to the end, they try to reclaim control in whatever ways they can. I told myself it was normal. Then I noticed the calls, blocked numbers, unknown callers. A few times, I answered and there was silence. Other times, I heard breathing, like someone wasn't sure whether to speak. Then one day, I picked up and heard Kyle's voice. I hadn't heard it in 6 years. "Is Dad around?" he asked. Casual, like we spoke all the time. I stood in the doorway, staring at the man who hadn't visited once in nearly a decade. "He's resting," I said flatly. We exchanged maybe 3 sentences before he hung up. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. I should have been more suspicious, but part of me wanted to believe the best, that maybe he was reaching out, that maybe after all this time, he'd finally decided to be present. Then, a week later, I found a receipt from a mobile notary service in the trash, dated just days earlier, signed by my father. When I asked him about it, he got defensive, something that never happened before. "You don't need to worry about that," he said. "Everything's taken care of." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the old pipes groan in the walls, trying to convince myself it was just paperwork. But deep down, I knew something was happening, and whatever it was, it didn't include me. It happened 3 weeks later. Dad passed in his sleep, just after dawn. I had gotten used to waking up early, checking his vitals, making sure he was warm, getting his meds prepped before he stirred. But that morning, the house was too quiet, too still. I walked into his room and knew, even before I touched him, that he was gone. There was no drama, no last words, just a silence that felt colder than the morning air. I made the calls. Hospice, the coroner, then Kyle. He didn't answer. I left a short voicemail. "Dad's gone." The funeral was small. Dad had outlived most of his friends, and the neighbors came out of politeness more than grief. Kyle arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in black jeans and a wrinkled button-down. He hugged me like someone you pass in an airport. No tears, no emotion, just surface-level sympathy and a hollow, "You holding up okay?" He scrolled his phone during the service. I pretended not to notice. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. A week later, Mr. Halford called and asked to meet. I assumed it was paperwork, closing accounts, handling utility transfers, wrapping up final expenses. I brought a binder I'd maintained for years, caregiving receipts, prescriptions, power of attorney documents, even the grocery logs. I had done everything right. I was ready. He sat me down gently, the way you do when you're about to break someone. "Your father updated his will this past spring," he said. "The entire estate, including the house, checking and savings accounts, and the vehicle has been left to your brother." I didn't understand. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," he said. "The documentation is legally binding. Signed, notarized, witnessed." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there while every sacrifice I'd made rewound itself in my mind like some cruel home movie. I had given up everything for my father. And now, legally, I didn't even exist. I walked out without saying goodbye. The sky was gray, and for the first time in 8 years, I felt it settle inside me. Something had broken, and for once, I wasn't going to be the one who held it all together. I didn't touch the binder for 2 days. It sat on the kitchen table, right where I dropped it after the meeting with Mr. Halford. Every time I walked past it, something in me burned. Not grief, not confusion, something colder, something sharper. On the 3rd day, I opened it. I flipped through the pages I had collected over the years, every receipt, appointment summary, home health invoice, even sticky notes from nurses scribbled in a rush. I hadn't realized how much of my life was in there. Not just documentation, but evidence of care, of presence, of sacrifice. And then I remembered something else. 8 years ago, when I first moved back, Dad had asked me to help him set up a living will and durable power of attorney. He was lucid, alert, and dare I say it, grateful. I remember him saying, "If anything happens, I want it to be you. You're the only one I trust." I still had the file. I dug into the hallway cabinet and found it labeled neatly in his handwriting. Inside were the original POA forms with my name on them, dated and signed. There was also a printed draft of an old will, one I'd never seen before. It wasn't notarized, but in it, he'd left the house to me and Kyle equally, with the note, "Laura will know what's fair." That line punched me harder than anything else. He did trust me. He had intended to be fair, so what changed? The new will had come only months before his death, when his cognition had started slipping when he began confusing dates, mixing up names, asking the same questions twice in 1 hour. I remembered Kyle's sudden reappearance during that time, and for the first time, I stopped assuming this was just an oversight. Maybe it wasn't confusion, maybe it was manipulation, and maybe Kyle had planned this all along. I started with the notary receipt I'd found in the trash. I remembered the date early March and went back through my calendar to see what had happened that week. Dad had a mild fall, nothing serious, but it had shaken him. I remembered helping him into bed, bringing him warm towels, refilling his water glass every hour. We'd stayed home the entire week. I would have noticed if he'd gone anywhere. Unless I wasn't there. I scrolled through my messages. That was the same weekend I flew to Denver for my college friend Melanie's wedding. My first time away in over a year. I was gone exactly 3 days. Just 3. But it was enough. That's when I felt it. The sting of precision. This wasn't chance. This was timing. I drove across town to the notary office listed on the receipt. It was a mobile legal service, squeezed between a laundromat and a vape shop. The inside smelled like toner and dust. A woman in her 50s sat behind the glass counter, sipping coffee and flipping through a ledger. I introduced myself. "Hi, my name is Laura Bishop. My father came in here a few months ago. I was hoping." She cut me off with a soft smile. "Oh, you're the daughter. I remember your dad. He came in with your brother." My stomach dropped like a trapdoor. "You're sure?" I asked. She nodded confidently. "Tall guy, dark hair, beard. Looked like the man in the photo he brought. Said it was from a graduation." She pointed to a dusty frame on the wall. It was Kyle, in his cap and gown. "He was the one doing most of the talking," she added. "Your dad didn't say much, just nodded a lot." I asked for a copy of the notary journal entry. She gave me what she legally could. Date, time, client names. It was all there. Kyle had taken him in on March 11th at 10 p.m., 2 hours into my return flight. Back home, I logged into our doorbell camera's cloud system. Most of the video footage was long gone, auto-deleted after 30 days, but the system still kept a motion flag archive. Tiny thumbnails of every time someone triggered the sensor. March 11th, 2:13 p.m., Kyle pulling up in a silver rental. 2:27 p.m., Dad, frail and slow, stepping outside, clutching Kyle's arm. It wasn't just a guess anymore. He had come back when I was gone. He had gotten Dad alone. He had moved quickly, efficiently, like someone executing a plan. I called Dr. Nguyen's clinic, the neurologist who had been monitoring Dad's cognitive decline. A nurse I remembered answered the phone. When I asked about Dad's condition around that date, she paused. "He was fading," she said gently. "Some days he didn't know what year it was. Some days he thought you were still a teenager." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the laminate surface until the edges blurred. It wasn't just suspicious anymore. It was strategic. Kyle hadn't stumbled into this. He had orchestrated it, found the window, moved while I was vulnerable, while Dad was vulnerable. And the worst part? Dad might have truly believed he was doing the right thing. Or worse, he didn't even understand what he was signing. 2 days after I spoke to the clinic, I received a letter. It was thick, formal, and came in a cream-colored envelope with a return address from Kyle's lawyer in Seattle. Inside was a notice. I had 60 days to vacate the house. The tone was polite, artificially so. It thanked me for assisting with caregiving during our father's final years, and requested my cooperation during the probate transition. Probate transition? That was a new way of saying, get out, and do it quietly. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it straight into the kitchen trash next to the notary receipt, the expired medication bottle, and whatever last pieces of comfort I still had left. That same afternoon, my phone rang. It was Aunt Susan. She didn't ask how I was, didn't say she was sorry for my loss. She just launched in, Laura, what are you doing? My chest tightened. What do you mean? Kyle says you're trying to contest the will, that you're threatening to sue the family? Of course he did. I tried to explain. Tried to tell her about the notary, about Dad's declining cognition, about the night Kyle slipped in and out like a ghost. But she cut me off. Your father made his decision. Maybe you didn't like it, but dragging this out just makes you look bitter. And ungrateful. You lived rent-free for 8 years. Ungrateful. That word slapped harder than anything else. As if being a full-time caregiver feeding, lifting, bathing, documenting every pill was some kind of privilege. As if losing sleep for 8 years was compensation enough. That night, I found scratches near the back door. Tiny, deliberate marks just beneath the handle. I checked the security cam at 2:19 a.m. Someone walked around the side of the house hood up, hands in pockets, unrecognizable. They didn't break in. They just watched. Then they left. The next day, I filed a police report. The officer was kind but vague. Could be someone passing through, he said. Keep your lights on. Let us know if it happens again. I started leaving the porch light on all night. Slept with a flashlight on my nightstand. Later that week, I began receiving texts from blocked numbers. First one said, he never wanted you to have it. The next, you think this makes you look good? They weren't threats, exactly, but they weren't nothing. They were needles, subtle, precise, meant to sting without drawing blood. Then came the Facebook messages. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years wrote, I don't know what's gotten into you. Kyle said you're trying to take the house from the family. Another aunt liked a comment under my father's obituary that said, some people only show up when there's money involved. The gaslighting wasn't accidental. It was a campaign. Coordinated. Orchestrated. They wanted me isolated. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me to doubt my own version of events. Angela Ramirez, the attorney I finally hired, sat across from me with a quiet, composed confidence. She wore her hair up, her sleeves rolled, and her tone measured. After reviewing Dad's medical history, the surveillance footage, and the old power of attorney documents, she said calmly, you have grounds, real ones, but be prepared. This won't stay civil for long. I nodded, because I already knew. It hadn't been civil in a long time. I always believed the real damage was done in the dark. Quiet conversations, signed papers no one sees. But the truth, the most dangerous secrets leave trails they just hope you're too tired or too broken to follow them. I wasn't either. Angela asked me to pull everything I had. Emails, voicemails, text logs, anything Kyle had ever sent or said. I spent the entire weekend hunched over my laptop, drowning in backups. I opened an old iCloud account I hadn't touched in years. Buried inside a folder labeled Dad 2015, between mundane PDFs, prescription receipts, Medicare printouts, dental records, I found an email thread that stopped me cold. It was from 2017, between Dad and Mr. Halford, the estate attorney. Dad had written, I don't want Laura to ever worry about this house. She gave up everything to be here. Please make sure she's protected. Halford replied the next morning, understood. I can prepare a revision for your review. I printed it immediately. Angela's eyes narrowed as she read it. This predates the will update by 6 years, she said. And more importantly, it directly contradicts it. She leaned back in her chair, hands steepled. This gives us narrative. This gives us intent. We sent a formal document request to Halford's office. All versions of my father's will, including notes, drafts, handwritten memos. The receptionist promised to search the archives. He's semi-retired, she said, like that excused anything. While we waited, I went back into Dad's financials. I still had access to the joint statements. I knew the account well. I paid every bill out of it. But this time I went line by line, carefully, slowly. That's when I saw it, March 15th. 4 days after the notary appointment, a wire transfer. $9, $500 sent to Kyle. Labeled consultation estate planning. I stared at it, reread it, and finally whispered out loud, Are you kidding me? Angela's face darkened when I showed her. He got paid to manipulate your father, she said. It's not technically illegal unless we prove intent. But this looks bad. And in probate court, optics matter. She added it to our case timeline along with the video, the email, and Dad's documented cognitive decline. The next day, Halford's assistant emailed back. She had found something. A full draft will dated June 2018, unsigned, but complete. In it, I was listed as the sole beneficiary of the house and bank accounts. The final paragraph included a personal statement from Dad. I trust Laura to manage what I leave behind. She has proven herself again and again. It was everything I had hoped he once believed, and everything the final will had erased. Angela placed the paper gently on the table between us and said, "This is real. This is personal. They didn't just cut you out. They tried to rewrite history." I sat back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. I wasn't sure if I was holding back tears or rage. Probably both. Because this wasn't just about money. This wasn't about property. It was about legacy, about identity, about what happens when someone thinks they can erase your presence like you never mattered at all. I had spent years cleaning up after sickness, after memory loss, after so many quiet disappointments. I'd made peace with never being thanked, but I would not make peace with being erased. Angela looked at me. "You ready for the next step?" I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I just reached for the draft will, folded it carefully, and slid it into my folder. Because now, I wasn't just defending what was mine. I was taking it back. Angela called it a layered response. "This isn't just about filing a claim," she said. "It's about controlling the narrative, about showing the court who your father really was and who Kyle really is." And so we got to work. The first layer was legal. Angela filed a formal petition to contest the will in probate court. Grounds: undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. We submitted the 2018 draft will, the notary receipt, the email between Dad and Halford, the neurological records, and the doorbell footage showing Kyle leading Dad out while I was out of town. Clean, structured, meticulous. But Angela didn't stop there. She knew Kyle would retaliate. Probably not through the courts, at least not at first. He'd go through the family, through social media, through whispers meant to chip away at my credibility. So Angela built 2 timelines, one legal, one personal. The legal timeline covered every verifiable fact, dates, documents, bank activity, messages. The personal one was about my years of care. She had me list everything, each appointment I'd scheduled, each therapy session, each prescription refill, each medical emergency. She had me dig through my email for meal orders I'd placed during hospital stays. Screenshots of pharmacy reminders, even old Amazon purchases like adult diapers and shower chairs. "This isn't just about what you did," she said. "It's about painting a picture the judge can't ignore." We reached out to Dr. Nguyen, Dad's primary physician, and asked for a statement about his cognitive decline during the months leading up to the will change. He agreed. Then came an unexpected ally, Maria, one of the hospice nurses from Dad's final month. She left a voicemail after hearing what happened. "I remember your father saying over and over again, 'She gave up her whole life for me.' I don't deserve her. If you need me to say that in court, I will." I cried after that call, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen. That night, I stayed up organizing photos me and Dad at home, at the VA clinic, even smiling during a good day at physical therapy. It wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about memory, proof that I existed in his final chapter. Angela helped me write my affidavit. She told me not to hold back. "Let the court see the toll this took on you. Let them understand why you're here." I wrote about the job I gave up, the relationship that fell apart, the isolation, the nights I sat beside his bed, wondering if this was how my life would end, defined by silence, sacrifice, and then, eventually, absence. Angela reviewed it, edited for clarity, but left in all the feeling. In parallel, I changed every password, added security cameras, and had a friend stay with me for the week. Not because I was afraid, because I was being watched. 2 days after we filed, Kyle posted a Facebook update. "Hard to grieve when people turn your father's death into a legal war. Some people can't let go." He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Within hours, a few cousins liked the post. An aunt commented with a heart emoji. Someone else shared it with the caption, "Family should stick together." Angela saw it too. "Let them keep posting," she said. "It won't matter. Their version only works if yours never makes it to court." And when I looked at everything we'd compiled, the documents, the timeline, the testimonies, I realized something. I wasn't just going to court to defend what I'd done. I was going to court to prove who I had been. Angela timed it perfectly. She waited until just before the next probate status hearing to file the supplemental declaration, a legal package that included the signed statement from Dad's doctor, the hospice nurse's testimony, the 2018 draft will, and screenshots of the $9.500 transfer to Kyle. She bundled it with our affidavit, my 8-year caregiving timeline, and high-resolution video stills of Kyle sneaking Dad out of the house while I was in Denver. The motion was clean, precise, surgical. Within 48 hours, the court accepted it into the record. The hearing was set for Friday morning. I arrived in the same navy suit I'd worn to Dad's funeral, not out of sentiment but because I wanted the contrast to be visible. That I had shown up at the end, when it mattered most, that I didn't disappear when things got hard. Kyle was already seated when I entered, flanked by a young, sharply dressed attorney who looked more interested in being seen than heard. Kyle stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to look at me. His posture radiated rehearsed confidence, but his hands betrayed him. They were restless, tapping the table, curling and uncurling. The judge entered, a woman in her early 50s with a clipped tone and no tolerance for theatrics. She flipped through the binder of motions, glasses perched low, and scanned both tables. "We're here to consider the petition to contest the will of Mr. Richard Bishop," she began. "The motion before us alleges undue influence, diminished capacity, and financial impropriety. Let's begin." Angela rose, composed as ever. Her voice was steady, clear, devoid of melodrama. She walked the court through the timeline. Dad's cognitive decline, Kyle's strategic reappearance, the 3-day window when I was out of town, the notary, the wire transfer, the 2018 draft, the email where Dad explicitly said I should be protected, the handwritten note. She finished by sliding a photo across the table, a still image from the doorbell cam, time-stamped, showing Kyle guiding our confused father out the front door with a rolled-up folder in his hand. Then she said, simply, "We're not here asking for sympathy. We're asking for scrutiny." The judge looked to Kyle's attorney. He stood, tugging at his cuffs. "Your Honor, while we don't dispute that caregiving is noble, inheritance is not based on effort." This was Mr. Bishop's clear, notarized intent. My client had no knowledge of diminished capacity, and the suggestion that he orchestrated a fraudulent will is both unfounded and emotionally charged. He smiled toward the judge, as if that would soften the blow. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Frankly, this seems driven more by bitterness than fact." Angela didn't flinch. Neither did I, but the judge did. She arched an eyebrow and asked, "Do you have any documentation to dispute the decedent's cognitive evaluations or the timeline presented?" He hesitated. "No, Your Honor." The judge turned to Angela. "What is the most compelling piece of evidence you're submitting?" Angela didn't hesitate. She slid forward a single-page handwritten note dated roughly a year before Dad's death. It wasn't a will. It wasn't notarized. But it was undeniably in his handwriting. It read, "No matter what happens, Laura has always done what's right. I trust her to take care of what I leave behind." The room was silent. Even Kyle shifted in his seat. Then the judge spoke. "I'm granting the motion to pause probate and authorize discovery into the validity of the current will. Further instructions will follow." Kyle finally looked at me. He didn't glare. He didn't smirk. He looked scared. And that was the first time I knew with absolute certainty that the tide had turned. Outside the courtroom, the air was crisp and clean, the sky impossibly blue. I stood still for a moment, just breathing. This wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, the story was no longer being written without me. The investigation phase took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of combing through documents, 4 weeks of silence from Kyle, 4 weeks of watching the narrative shift, one file at a time. Angela kept me updated on every development. The court granted us limited discovery, which meant Halford, the estate attorney, was required to hand over all internal correspondence about Dad's estate. Emails, call logs, draft revisions, meeting notes. The request wasn't just a formality. It was a trap. 2 days into the review, Angela called me. "They found something," she said. Actually, a few somethings. The first was an email exchange between Kyle and Halford's assistant. In it, Kyle asked whether an older draft listing Laura as the primary could be disposed of after the new version was signed. He used words like clean break and no confusion. The second was a handwritten meeting summary from Halford himself dated 6 weeks before Dad died. In the notes, Halford had written, "Client's memory unstable. Asked twice if Laura was the one in Seattle. Seemed unsure who was living with him. There is no Laura in Seattle, and I was the one living with him for 8 years." Angela added it to the case file. "It's more than enough," she said. "But we're going to do this by the book." She requested a full evidentiary hearing. The judge, after reviewing the material, agreed. Kyle tried to delay. His lawyer filed a motion to continue, citing mental distress and emotional burden. The court denied it. So we showed up on a Wednesday morning. This time, the courtroom wasn't half empty. Word had spread through the family. A few cousins were seated in the back. Aunt Susan was there too, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Angela presented first. She led with the emails, then the notes, then the bank statement showing the $9. 500 transfer? She framed the entire case as a pattern. Opportunity, manipulation, benefit? Then she called Maria, the hospice nurse. Maria testified under oath that Dad consistently talked about leaving the house to me. He said it was only fair. He said she was the only one who stayed. Then it was my turn. I took the stand with shaking hands but a steady voice. I didn't talk about love or betrayal. I talked about facts. The number of medications I administered. The therapy sessions I scheduled. The appointments I drove him to. I showed the court grocery receipts, electric bills, tax documents all under my name. I read an excerpt from my caregiving log the week Dad lost the ability to walk. No drama. No tears. Just the truth. Kyle didn't testify. His lawyer didn't even call a witness. Their strategy shifted halfway through. Now it was about damage control. Let's not tear this family further apart. he said in closing. There's already been enough loss. But the judge didn't buy it. She recessed for 30 minutes. When she returned, her words were clear, sharp, and final. This court finds compelling evidence that the decedent was under undue influence and lacked full cognitive capacity at the time the most recent will was executed. The 2021 amendment is hereby voided. The prior valid draft, dated June 2018, will be reinstated as the binding testament. She paused, then added, further review of financial misconduct including potential exploitation is referred to the county for investigation. I didn't turn to look at Kyle. I didn't need to. His silence said enough. I walked out of that courtroom into the sunlight like it was something I'd earned. Not gifted. Not granted. Fought for. And won. It came 2 days after the ruling. A letter. Hand-delivered. No return address. Just my name. Written in Kyle's handwriting. I stared at the envelope for a full minute before I opened it. Part of me expected it to explode in a cloud of excuses. Another part expected nothing at all. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. No apology. No greeting. No signature. If you agree to split the estate 50-50, I'll drop any appeal. We can both move on. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because of the timing. Because of the audacity. Because after months of silence, of manipulation, of watching him try to cut me out of my own father's life and legacy, this was the olive branch. He had waited until after the ruling, until the judge had voided the amended will, until the county officially announced they were opening an investigation into the wire transfer, until it became real. Angela read the letter without a word, then looked at me with calm certainty. You're under no obligation to respond. He's trying to salvage what little ground he has left. We've already won. I nodded, but a part of me didn't want to stay silent. Not this time. I didn't need a drawn-out exchange. I didn't need to argue. So I sent him one text, my first message to him in over a year. You had a chance to be fair before you chose to be cruel. That chance is gone. No response. Just the little delivered mark sitting there like punctuation on a burned bridge. That night, I got a voicemail from Aunt Susan. Her voice was softer now, slower. There was no accusation in it, no veiled disappointment. Laura, I don't know everything that happened, but I'm sorry. You didn't deserve how this played out. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Some fractures don't heal with one phone call. Some silences need to stay intact for a little longer. The next morning, I stood in the center of the living room, the same one where I'd spoon-fed my father, sat awake through his restless nights, argued with doctors, and wondered if I was slowly disappearing. The sun poured through the curtains with an unfamiliar warmth. Not forgiving, but honest. For the first time in years, the walls didn't feel like they were pressing in. The floor didn't creak with exhaustion. The air didn't taste like loss. It felt like mine, not because anyone gave it to me, because I earned it. And this time I refused to hand it back. A month later, the county investigation was in full swing. Angela sent me updates, court filings, financial reports, things Kyle's lawyer was desperately trying to redact, but by then, I didn't need every detail. The big fight was over. I had what mattered. The house. The truth. My name, restored where it had been erased. And slowly, life began to stretch again like a limb waking up after too long in one position. I started with the quiet things. I cleaned out Dad's room, not in anger, not in grief, just in gratitude. I folded his clothes carefully, one by one. Some went to Goodwill, some I boxed for storage. But I kept his old gray cardigan, the one he wore during our late-night TV binges, the one that still smelled faintly like aftershave and cinnamon gum. His watch stayed on the nightstand. I couldn't move it, not yet, in the bottom drawer of his dresser. Taped under a stack of warranty papers, I found something I didn't expect. A letter. It was addressed to me. The envelope was creased at the edges. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakably his. I opened it slowly, my breath stuck halfway between dread and hope. Laura, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to say it. But I want you to know that I saw you. Every night, every grocery run, every appointment. I saw the way you cared when I couldn't care for myself. I saw what you gave up, and I knew it wasn't fair. You stayed not because you had to, but because you loved deeply. That love, it saved me. I love you, kiddo. Always. Dad. I read it 3 times. The first, I wept. The second, I smiled. The third, I folded it back into its envelope and placed it inside the drawer. Next to his watch. I didn't need to frame it. I didn't need to share it with anyone. It was mine. Later that week, I bought a few planters and started a small garden outside the kitchen window. Tomatoes, basil, rosemary. The kind of things Dad always said were too much trouble but secretly loved when I used them in his meals. I began leaving the front door open while I cooked, letting the breeze move through the house. I played music louder. I painted one wall yellow just because I could. The house no longer felt like a relic I was guarding. It felt like a place I belonged. One evening, I sat on the front porch with a mug of tea and realized something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Peace. Not because I had won, not because Kyle had lost, not even because the title deed now carried my name alone, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone else to say I mattered. I showed up. I stayed. I carried the weight no one else would touch. And in the end, I didn't just reclaim a house, I reclaimed myself.